So this book is about a particularly cool person named Joan Procter, Dragon Doctor, the woman who loved reptiles. Back in the days of long skirts and afternoon teas, a little girl named Joan Procter entertained the most unusual party guests. Slithery and scaly, they turned over teacups. They crawled past the crumpets. While other girls read stories about dragons and princesses, Joan read books about lizards and crocodiles. Instead of a favorite doll, a favorite lizard accompanied her wherever she went. Each day after school, Joan retreated to her bedroom where she studied lizards, snakes, and turtles. She took careful notes just like a scientist. And on the days Joan was too sick to attend school, tiny toes and eager eyes cheered her up. The reptiles were quiet and watchful, just like Joan. For her 16th birthday, Joan received a most curious gift, a baby crocodile. She tied a little ribbon around his waist and took him for a walk. She even brought him to math class one day. The students shrieked. The teacher recoiled. Apparently, crocodiles were not welcome at school. When Joan grew older, she skipped the parties and dances with her friends, and instead she sought out the curator of reptiles and fish at the Natural History Museum. The curator is the person who picks everything that goes in the museum. And there, Joan and the curator taught snake scales, size, shape, texture, patterns, and even evolution. Sometimes, Joan smuggled in her crocodiles to the delight of the curator. He knew right away that Joan was special. But soon, those carefree days came to an end, and England was at war. Women took up jobs left behind by men, and the curator found himself short-staffed at the museum. So he hired Joan as his assistant to help out. Joan did very well at the Natural History Museum. As a scientist, she surveyed the museum's vast collections and published research papers on pit vipers and pancake tortoises. As an artist, she created exquisite models and drawings for the reptile exhibits. When the curator retired, Joan took over, and men returning from war were surprised to find a woman in charge. But times were changing, and Joan was leading the way. A few years later, the London Zoo decided to replace its old, outdated reptile house, and the zoo director asked Joan to design a new home for the animals. Joan knew exactly how to keep reptiles happy. She added elaborate lighting and state-of-the-art heaters that provided hot spots to keep the cold-blooded animals warm, and she brought in plants and created artwork that mimicked each animal's natural environment. So she decorated the entire place and made sure that each animal would be comfortable there. And she made sure that the place was extra warm because reptiles are cold-blooded, so if they're not warm, they can't move, whereas we're warm-blooded, which means that even if it's cold outside, we can still move. We just have to wear layers. Let's see how many animals we can see. 1, 2, 3. I feel like I'm missing one. 4. Joan took extra care designing one enclosure in particular. By this time, stories had emerged of a fierce, man-eating lizard with a long forked tongue living on the faraway Indonesian island of Komodo. It was rumored to be 30 feet long, faster than a motor car, and stronger than an ox. They called it the Komodo dragon. The stories didn't frighten Joan, though. She dreamed of studying the dragons up close. And on opening day of the new reptile house, visitors packed the zoo. They gawked at the geckos, they peered at the pythons, and they marveled at the monitors. But when they reached Joan's special enclosure, they gasped. 2 7-foot-long lizards stared back at them. You can ask your parents to measure out 7 feet with you later, maybe in the kitchen, maybe on the rug. Just place 1 foot in front of the other, and that'll give you a rough estimate. These were real-life dragons. Although the visitors were thrilled, Joan was a little concerned. One of the Komodo dragons, Simbawa, did not look well, and to the shock of the zoo guests, she entered the enclosure. She moved Simbawa to the reptile clinic with the help of 6 nervous keepers. The dragon let Joan clean a sore in his mouth with no fuss at all. In fact, he thanked Joan by licking her face. Joan thought Sumbawa was brave, and the keepers thought Joan was braver. News of Joan and the Komodo dragon spread. Reporters flocked to the reptile house with questions. Had she ever been bitten? Was she afraid of the dragons? What kind of woman runs a reptile house? Joan wished the reporters would ask about the animals instead. Look, she even brought Sumbawa out. Joan cared for each and every creature in the reptile house. From daily health checks to delicate surgeries, her dedication and talent could not be matched. Joan's research, her clinical skills, and the success of the new reptile house was heard about all over the world. She became an international sensation. The Zoological Society of London invited Joan to present the Komodo dragon research at a scientific meeting. As Joan took the stage, she wheeled out Sumbawa, sitting freely atop a large table. The audience squirmed in their seats, so they were probably pretty nervous because they didn't know a Komodo dragon was coming. Joan stroked Sumbawa's head and fed him a pigeon. He ate it one gulp. Sumbawa wandered through the audience as Joan explained that the reports of Komodo dragons were greatly exaggerated. They could grow up to 10 feet, not 30. They ran fast, but not as fast as a motor car. And they could be fierce, but they were mostly gentle. When Joan finished her presentation, Sumbawa returned to her side, and the audience erupted in applause. Joan's passion for reptiles never waned, and for the rest of her life she'd be found walking or riding through the zoo with Sumbawa by her side. And just like when she was a little girl, Joan often hosted children's tea parties at the reptile house with her scaly friends. Sumbawa was the guest of honor. So this book is really awesome. I think the next best thing would be to go to Animal Planet or Animal Planet Go and find Crikey, It's the Irwins. There's a girl named Bindi Irwin who's the daughter of Steve Irwin as well as her brother, Robert Irwin. And it goes through everything that they do to care for animals, in particular reptiles, which they have a lot of in all the research and good that they do for the environment. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope that you enjoyed all the books.